All right, today we're going to step into the Bitchuation Room with Francesca Fiorentini as we talk about Kamala Harris's loss and Bernie Sanders' assertion that the Democratic Party has abandoned the working class. We'll also touch on Nancy Pelosi pushing back on that a little bit, and we're going to chop it up. So let's get going.
This was the week where there's been a lot of Dem-on-Dem violence as the postmortems of what happened, how it happened, who let it happen around the Kamala Harris campaign and this loss, which is being painted as massive, but really it's just a loss. It's just the same, the way that Hillary Clinton lost and all this. And there are a number of theories of why, obviously, Kamala Harris lost. I mean, the basic one is that she was handed sloppy seconds of a presidency by Joe Biden and was asked to do the impossible, but also didn't really have a, strong basic message herself.
I mean, I have to agree with that. I think it's both ways. I think she got a pretty short stick, but I also, and I don't know that we get into it in this video with Bernie Sanders, but I also think I agree with him in terms of she did not have a clear campaign message for the people. And Donald Trump identified a working class problem that although the economy might be great on paper, it doesn't feel great in the streets, and it hasn't for a long time. And Donald Trump acknowledged that. And although his solution for it is to blame, murdering, raping immigrants flooding into our country and stealing our jobs and eating dogs and cats, insanity, right? It's a BS solution. He offered, he said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fix it. And I do think that people responded to that message.
And, Donald Trump was just selling a bunch of lies. But anyway, here is Bernie Sanders in his statement. He said, it should come as no great surprise that the Democratic Party, which has abandoned working class people, would find that the working class has abandoned them. First, it was the white working class. Now it's Latino and black workers as well. And while the Democratic leadership defends the status quo, the American people are angry and want change, and they're right. With big money interests and well-paid consultants who control the Democratic Party, will they learn any real lessons from this disastrous campaign? Will they understand the pain and political alienation that tens of millions of Americans are experiencing? Do they have any ideas as to how we can take on the increasingly powerful oligarchy, which has so much economic and political power? Probably not. And then he said, we have to have some very serious political discussions. Reactions, thoughts to Mr. Sanders on why there was this loss?
Yeah, I think it's very clear. He's absolutely right. And he's in a position to say this because he's not bought by any big lobbyists or corporations. And there's a lot of freedom that comes with you being independent, i.e. this show as well, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we all need to acknowledge is that is the true path of freedom for us, is to create independence out of the system, because the people who are in power or who are seeking power are never going to stop. They're never going to stop until we make them stop or until we devalue their product where they have to pivot and try something else. And so I think that when we think about, I was talking with a friend and she was like, oh, in 4 years this. And I said, I really want us to stop thinking that there's going to be an outright election in 4 years. I think we need to start thinking that we are in 1990s Russia. Like this is the start of like carving up the United States empire and selling it to the highest bidder. Donald Trump has no allegiance to America. He is not a patriot. He's a businessman. He's a con man. And he wants to be popular and he wants to be powerful. The thing is that there are people who are more powerful than him who can use his ego to assist them in their personal endeavors. And he's going to lap it up like a dog because he thinks that this attention is actually validating him, where really he is being conned out of his own con.
Wow. I cannot agree with that more. That is so well summarized.
So for us, the little people that are still here on the ground, we need to connect with each other and create our community and work with our independent news sources. We need to fund these people who are going to keep the story going, because as you mentioned earlier in the show, when it comes to media, the media is very powerful. And I want everybody to acknowledge something. As a person of color, as a Black woman specifically in America, the Black community has always talked about how media has stereotyped us. And they've used us to be the boogeyman to scare people every election cycle. This season it was Black men is not voting. 30, 40 years ago, it was, the welfare mom. There was the guy that's going to rape your kids. It was always using us to motivate people to get to the election polls. And so now we have new boogeymen. Right now it's the migrants. Now it's the Muslims. Now it's the war overseas. And it's all these things. Now trans rights, women's rights. It's all these things to force people to go out and vote, because they just need our vote to cover up the sham, which is them really having these political motivations and these business motivations. Yeah. So it's time for us to divest from the ruse, because as long as we sign up for it, they'll keep playing in our face.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and on that, I'm just going to be honest about where I'm at, with the Democratic Party right now. I am not I'm not sure I'm giving them another chance. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure if I don't see some real change in leadership. I understand the two-party duopoly. I understand all that. But like, if we don't actually see change in leadership, Chuck Schumer hasn't resigned as a Senate leader, Hakeem Jeffries, all these centrists, because they haven't learned the actual lesson, which I do think is in part of what Bernie said. Like, the economy might have been good to certain people, but we know the metrics for measuring an economy are completely ruptured from what people actually feel on a daily basis when they're trying to pay their rent, when they're trying to make ends meet, when they're taking a second job, when, they're driving around in, doing delivery apps, as like a second or third method of income. I mean, it's really, really rough. So, yeah. And one thing I'll say about Bernie, I do want to say, I feel like he doesn't and hadn't always had this smoke for Joe Biden. And to be honest with you, I feel like that's why we got Joe Biden. Bernie soft pedaled on Joe Biden during their one-on-one debate. It was, I think, the second debate or the only debate they had, just the two of them in 2020. He didn't go hard at him, but he went hard on Clinton. He had no problems with doing that. And I think it's partly because he and Biden go back really, really far. So it's just annoying to me that I'm like, yes, Bernie, it is that the Democrats have abandoned the working class, but you were kind of singing Biden's praises not too long ago. So why are you saying this now? Like, let's be real. You thought that Biden was doing an okay job, and he wasn't. He wasn't doing nearly a good enough job.
Just before we get a little too far away from it, I agree with Francesca Fiorentini. I do think what they're touching on is what's going to need to happen. We're going to need to break the wheel. We're going to need to reinvent the system because it's not going to reinvent itself, or it seems to be reinventing itself right now in pretty alarming ways that I think most Americans will be unhappy with. I hope I'm wrong, but all signs point to authoritarianism as we move into this Trump 2.0 era. But the question is how do we get from where we are, which is unhappy, and how do we avoid just sitting on our thumbs and doing shows like this where we talk about it and complain? Not that I'm saying that's what Francesca Fiorentini is doing, but sometimes is what it feels like to me. We have to map out a way forward, an action plan to make sure that we cut through this red tape of a bureaucracy that feels like, whether it's red or blue, has stopped serving Americans.
But here is, before we move on to a couple of other leaders. So he said that, and Nancy Pelosi was asked to respond to that specifically. Then Bernie's asked to respond to the Pelosi. There's some back and forth cattiness. Take a look.
The girls are fighting.
The girls are fighting.
As you know, your statement was met with some sharp reaction as well. This is what Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi had to say. Take a look. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
Bernie Sanders has not won. Let me, with all due respect, and I have a great deal of respect for him, for what he stands for, but I don't respect him saying that the Democratic Party has abandoned the working class families.
Senator, how do you respond to Nancy?
Okay, they haven't abandoned working class families. Chloe, this is a person who, for all of the tactical ways she is smart and capable, consistently says things like there's no reason to ban stock trading for Congress people, because, what do you mean conflict of interest? Of course it's a conflict of interest. You are ostensibly regulating these very corporations that you're benefiting from. So it's just like, Nancy Pelosi says this draped in her maize, wearing her, like Manolo Blahniks. We haven't abandoned the working class. Come on, girl. Like, even you don't believe that.
No, Nancy is like those women in Doom that control all the world. What is it? The Jezeret? What is it? What are they called again? That's Nancy.
I don't know. So who's the Lisan al-Gaib? I don't even know how to say it, but it was said like a million times. Just like Javier Bardem scream Lisan al-Gaib at me. We're still looking for who the Lisan al-Gaib is.
Yeah, it's a B'nai Jezeret. There it is. Thank you, folks.
Dune references. But I have to agree again with Francesca Fiorentini. Nancy Pelosi. It is very difficult to say that Nancy Pelosi is not a master politician. Few people, I think, who have had that job have done a more effective job of it. In the same way that you have to look at Mitch McConnell, and I have no love for Mitch McConnell, but you cannot argue that he has not been effective in his role. What I will say about both of these highly accomplished and effective politicians is it does feel like they are not necessarily operating in the interest of the day-to-day average American citizen.
All right, let's watch his response.
Pelosi.
Well, Nancy is a friend of mine, and we've worked together on many issues. But here is the reality. I have to say to Nancy, in the Senate in the last 2 years, we have not even brought forth legislation to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, despite the fact that some 20 million people in this country are working for less than $15 an hour. In America today, we have not brought, in the Senate, we have not brought to the floor the PRO Act to make it easier for workers to join unions. We're not talking about defined benefit pension plans so that our elderly can retire with security. We're not talking about lifting the cap on Social Security so that we can extend the solvency of Social Security and raise benefits. Bottom line, if you're an average working person out there, do you really think that the Democratic Party is going to the mats, taking on powerful special interests and fighting for you? I think the overwhelming answer is no. And that is what has got to change.
Yeah, I mean, amen. It's just wild. And to think, Chloe, that like some people think that Donald Trump is going to the mat for them. That's just wild to me.
Okay, so listen, I talked with a black man who voted for Trump this weekend.
And wow. Did you know them before?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I've known them for a long time, but we haven't seen each other for a while. So I ran into them recently.
Got it.
So I was like, oh, how's everything going with you? Blah, blah, blah. And this person is a business owner, right?
Sure.
And it was during this conversation, I didn't have any judgment, right? I don't have any judgment from people on who they vote because you don't know what they have experienced or how they think. Yeah. I don't know why. So
I have to agree. I have to agree with that. And as much as I have passionate feelings about this, and I will do some, I'll call this right wing or that right wing person a dodo head or a peanut brain or whatever. I try and keep it relatively clean. We have to find a way to come together here. And I think that one of the very first things is we have to strip away these knee-jerk judgments that we're making about each other. We don't know each other's lives. We can't understand each other's experience until we get past these, red state, blue state, pre-programmed ideas and start relating to each other and figuring it out person to person, right, in a real way. So I think stripping away judgment that's a powerful thing to put into this hopper of like, how do we start getting around this this machine that we feel stuck in that isn't serving our interests.
I didn't listen.
Right.
And so he honestly thought that as a business owner and with the current state and inflation and tariffs, whatever, that like Donald Trump is going to give them like a PPP loan.
Right.
And I'm like, but there's no, the crisis is every day. There's no epidemic. There's no checks that are going to be just cut.
Like specifically what's interesting is, did he get it the first time around? Because Trump really was able to get businesses, and specifically his friends' businesses, PPP loans. There were militias that got 3%. Sorry, I'm thinking of the 3%ers that got PPP loans. Jan 6ers got PPP loans.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I don't think that it's going to be as wide of a net as it was before, because then he was still operating under the guise, even though there was a lot of like shady businesses, it was still under the guise that it was open to the American people. I think that guise is gone. I think that ruse is over. I don't think that appealing to the masses is what he ever intended to do, and he doesn't have to do it anymore. So I think if you were given any sort of safety net before, especially if you were a person of color or any of the groups that are being targeted, I don't think it's going to be rolling out the red carpet with a check just because you own a business.
Yeah. Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, I think it's also going to be harder. I mean, in terms of raw materials or whatever you might need, if the tariffs are coming down on you, like, it will be more expensive. And I think part of that, they know that it'll be more expensive. And they're like, but this is necessary.
They don't
I think Trumpers know there's going to be pain in the economy, but it's all going to be, good in the end because we'll stick it to China. And it's like, I feel like we're going to go to war with China before. We would rather go to a hot war with China than try to win the trade war with China. Like, be honest.
This is the thing about China. We owe them so much money. America owes them so much money. And the reason why China is not messing with us is because we owe them money. And America was like, we know you owe you money, but we don't care. And China said, watch this. We're going to.
And I also want to say, I'm not sure I agree with Francesca Fiorentini on this one. I think what she says, the Trumpers, maybe the people in his administration understand that it's BS, but I'm not sure that people that voted for Donald Trump understand that this whole tariff shenanigan thing is BS. I think they believe that he's a smart businessman and he's just going to fix it. Forget about his poor leadership during his 4-year tenure as president the first time. Expert testimony, they're either not hearing it or they just think he's a bunch of nerds, or they just goes in one ear and they disregard it. I'm not sure that people who voted for Donald Trump understand that the tariffs is going to make things more expensive.
make you care. And now America's like, we want to fight. You can't fight me when you owe me money. I should have beat your ass a long time ago. And now you need to sit here and suffer and realize that I'm taking over the world market because you played in my face and you didn't pay me my money.
Yes, and also the China owning so much U.S. debt is part of the reason that like the dollar remains strong, versus like them owning a bunch of American bonds is like part of what keeps the dollar artificially strong.
Okay, so what do we think about all this? I want to hear in the comments. Do you agree with Francesca Fiorentini? What about what Bernie Sanders said? What about what Nancy Pelosi has said about the Democratic Party not giving up on the working class? Pop it in the comments. Give us a like and subscribe, please. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening. And I look forward to hearing your thoughts.